Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's University Business Web Seminar, which is entitled Building Accounting and Finance Resilience, Making a Case for Change, which is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor here today, Blackline. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items with you, and then we'll get right on the ball. If you have if at any time you need any technical support, please use the chat panel, which you can find on the right side of your screen, then select on my name, which is Stephen Blackburn, and then type your message and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. If for whatever reason you don't have computer speakers, or maybe you prefer to listen privately, I'll be submitting a phone number and access code in the chat that you can dial in, so look out for that as well. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have today. So there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can submit any of your questions by using the Q&A panel, which you can find at the bottom right side of your screen, and then send your questions to all panelists. If you currently don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, just look again to the bottom right-hand side of your screen and then click on the expand triangle, which should be located directly in front of the panel name to make sure you have access to it. And the last point I'd like to make before we get started, if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, you'll be pleased to know that everyone who is registered and who is attending today, all of you will receive an email with a link to the slides as well as an archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to hand things off to the moderator of today's event, Kevin Guyton, who is the Vice President of State and Local Government as well as Higher Education over at Blackline. Hi, Kevin. Great to have you with us today. Thank you very much.
Stephen, thanks for having us. Great to be here. Really appreciate it. Also joining me today is Mike Palaha. Mike is our Senior Vice President, Finance Solutions and Technology at Blackline. And Mike has a really unique perspective. He's going to share it today, having been through a complete finance transformation himself and dealing with a number of the issues we faced over the past 18 months as an industry. So with that, I'm going to move forward with our agenda. And we conducted first of all, we're going to go through some survey results. We actually conducted a survey with University Business, and this took place toward the end of last year through an online questionnaire. We had 277 respondents, various titles, as well as a nice representation of different institution sizes. And it gave us a really nice snapshot of the state of the market. We're going to see how your peers responded to various questions on how they were impacted over the past 18 months and some of their plans specific to the finance area. We'll go through the survey findings. We're going to have a discussion throughout, and then toward the end, we're going to open it up to Q&A. Now, to submit questions, you're going to see a Q&A box on the lower right. You could submit questions at any time, and within the time, Mike and I are going to do our best to answer each of those. But again, if you can, feel free to enter them throughout the presentation, but we will be addressing those toward the end of the presentation. So one of the questions on the survey, we wanted to understand how accounting and finance processes have really been compounded at your institution as a result of this disruption. And, really what your experience has been when it comes to how those processes were impacted and the level of impact. Really interesting responses, not too surprising here. 87% of the responses found it more challenging than normal. And that was for a variety of factors. We found that some of these challenges really intensified the need to look at how we're doing things today. Technology, processes, having a remote workforce, increased expectations, and how has that impacted the level of interest in modernizing finance and technology processes, because this has been an area of focus at a number of institutions. You've heard about digital transformation, finance transformation, a variety of other initiatives, and it has really been moved toward the spotlight. We're seeing this in a number of your 5-year strategic plans, finance agility. It appears in different forms, having technology to support staff, faculty, and ultimately this impacts student success. Not very surprising here, there's been increased interest. About 48% of the responses said increased interest, 49%, no change, just kind of status quo for now, and a very small minority decreased interest. The no change we're finding in some of those discussions, there's an investigation phase. Really, what does digital transformation mean? What does it mean? What areas do we need to focus on that are going to have the most impact with limited resources, but delivering the most value as well? And I know, Mike, in some of your previous roles, you focused on technology as really the cornerstone of better utilizing staff. Anything you'd like to speak on and some of the things that you've implemented in the past?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide a commercial perspective to elements of the survey. I think here, from a commercial lens, I think we would probably expect to see even a larger interest that's being noted here. I think, commercially, there's been proven to be technology to modernize the repetitive, and I think there is a greater sense of urgency to get that technology in place. So you hear a lot about digital finance transformation. Companies are investing significantly in this space. And I think it is and has been accelerated by COVID. The need to have technology that allows accounting departments to collaborate virtually, I think is something that's going to be value added, not just now, but looking into the future as more and more commercial companies go to flexible remote type of working situations.
Great, thanks, Mike. Very consistent with the discussions we're having at a variety of different institutions, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. So, speaking of the variety of institutions that are really focusing and looking at ways to implement better processes and have process improvement, we just wanted to take a quick snapshot. What type is your institution? We're going to keep this poll open for about another 20 seconds or so. If you could respond, we're going to see those responses real time so we can get a sense of the representation of the group here. Okay, we'll give it about 5 more seconds. Fantastic.
I'll get those up in a second. There we go.
There we go. Stephen's going to help me out here. And we have really nice representation, 52% private 4-year, 25% public 4-year. We have about 14% public 2-year institutions, and then 2% for-profit 2-year. Really nice representation, and it's very interesting. We're finding that institutions are looking at transformation and opportunities for process improvement through technology a little bit differently depending on the type of institution you have. One consistent theme we hear are limited resources. How do we better utilize those resources? Some of the top accounting and finance challenges over the past 12 to 18 months. Again, these results were not too surprising to us, but we'll go through a few of these here. Dealing with the loss of revenue. So, having a real-time financial picture is really critical to understanding which programs are working, which are not, where we need to invest, and what areas of our institution are going to drive the best return. We're seeing shifting demographics. We're seeing changing student behavior. And this has been front and center for the majority of institutions that we're working with. Managing low employee morale. So if you think about it, again, not very surprising at all. And this is not only higher education, but other areas and other industries that we see. Morale goes down as employees are performing tasks that really don't fit their professional skill set, nor their degree, or really what they can contribute to the institution. So these are routine tasks, manual efforts, and we find a heavy focus of this in the accounting area. Ticking and tying, just doing manual matching through spreadsheets, versus performing some analytical functions, performing other functions that can really help improve the institution, contribute to student success through contributing to different programs and analysis that will create a better student experience. So, low employee morale, very similar story across our industries. Too much work, not enough time, not enough staff, but a lot of it comes down to the way we go about things and the processes in place. And that directly ties into dealing with the lack of adequate staff resources, which is, over half of the responses cited this as a major challenge. So a lot of the other responses really, were played into the top three. If we look at providing staff access with data, we consistently hear that a lot of institutions weren't set up to have a remote workforce, and we're still working with shared drives. We're still sending files back and forth in the finance area versus really having one set of data, one set of the truth. And that leads to a loss of productivity. Manual efforts, of course, increase risk. So minimizing risk is without standards in place, without a foundation, and without repeatable processes that are, of course, aided by technology, risk increases. That ties into training and onboarding staff. So there are a number of things happening in higher education. We've heard of the mass resignation, but there were a lot of retirements, a significant number over the past couple of years. And of course, you can bring new talent into the organization as a result, but there were two problems with that. One, attracting the right talent when you don't have the systems in place that they're expecting. So if you think about it, someone coming into the workforce that's been trained in the context of technology and some level of automation, then being asked to, just use spreadsheets or, just manually perform certain tasks, misses those expectations, and they typically don't stick around long. With the retiring staff, the biggest problem I've seen are that processes were not documented and the systems were not in place to really effectively close the books in a timely fashion, in a risk-free fashion. And you had all of this tribal knowledge walking out the door. So it became very difficult to train and onboard future staff. This, of course, tied into compliance, supporting documents, and of course, for our CIOs, integration is completely key. We've got a significant investment in our ERPs. It really doesn't matter what you're using. It could be an Ellucian Banner, a Colleague, a Workday, Oracle. Having something in place that creates a very clean data exchange is, of course, very key. Otherwise, the burden shifts to the IT staff. Mike, anything stand out to you in these results?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I know when we chatted about this yesterday, very consistent to the challenges being faced within commercial finance departments as well. If I were to summarize from a theme perspective, the challenges around the delivery of the service in the most efficient way is one set of challenges. Secondarily, how can we make our finance and accounting function as efficient and effective as possible? So redeploying that capital, that human capital, toward analytics and the differentiated way to support the business. And then also, this notion around employee experience. I think, how do we retain our top talent? by having them work with the best process and software that's available. I think all of those challenges and themes are really summarized by those 3 E's, so to speak.
Yeah, totally agree. Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. All of this tells us that typically at pretty much the majority of the institutions that we speak with, the current process really isn't sustainable. We have increasing demands. We have a wider net of stakeholders. There's a heavy focus on the finance area right now at a number of institutions, and it's coming from the board of directors. It's coming from donors. There's increased scrutiny, and of course, with forthcoming regulation, a lot of us are just simply not prepared with our current processes to deliver in the way we need to and in the time frame we need to. All this ties into having the right strategy, both from a people and process standpoint, but the technology that supports that. Better utilizes the staff that you have, and it really creates higher value work and less work. Okay, so moving on through the survey, we asked if financial close challenges are inhibiting gaining an accurate financial picture. And 43% said there's a severe impact. I was a little bit surprised by these results. Mike, I thought actually it would be a little bit higher, just based on my experience. And I've been working in higher education 25 years, working with a variety of different institutions, and there is with a lot of the forthcoming regulations and a lot of the the increased scrutiny. I think that there's going to be added pressure in a very short time frame to have an accurate financial picture and a little more of a real-time financial picture. This goes well beyond just reporting, but rather really understanding have we reconciled all of our accounts? Do we have supporting documents? Do we really understand where we are in each area of the institution versus a look-back approach? 43% said a moderate to severe impact. And we had 18% that said never, and we had some sometimes as well. I think we're going to start to see this pie chart change over the coming year. I mean, would you agree?
Yes, Kevin, definitely. And I think if this polling was done commercially, I would expect to see a much higher percentage on this particular slide for many of the reasons that you articulated. I think many business leaders are requiring more timely, accurate financial information in order to understand what's happening with their business and markets in more real time. And this shift to something we would call continuous accounting or modern accounting, where we would, endeavor to get as real of a picture as possible to inform business strategies and decisions in a very real-time manner, I think is where commercially there's a lot of energy being spent.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'll just give a little brief blurb on Mike's background. He's got very diverse experience, and he led one of the largest finance transformations that that I've seen. And it was actually at Johnson & Johnson, where he was the leader of that. So we're from my perspective, when I look at higher education and where I've been living for quite some time, I believe that there's a huge opportunity. Part of what drives, if you think about commercial versus higher education and the differences, of course, there are many, but on the finance side, on the commercial side of the business, there are some pretty significant consequences if we don't present an accurate financial picture, if we don't present a timely financial picture. Currently in higher education, a lot of my institutions really don't suffer fines or as severe consequences if something is not, if we don't have that accurate, timely financial picture, if we're not issuing statements. There's going to be board scrutiny, of course, but at most, if you have an audit that doesn't go fantastic, you have pick your auditor. It may impact our bond rating, but certainly no like SEC fines or anything like that. So There's a big shift though, and that is changing. That will be changing over the next couple of years. Okay, so let's move forward. So accounting teams increasingly deliver, our accounting teams increasingly expected to deliver real-time financial information. Is leadership enforcing this? Are they requesting access? This has shifted a bit. So 65% of the respondents indicated they certainly are being requested by leadership to provide more real-time info. And a lot of that has to do with how the institution is evolving, how we are shifting and looking at the way that we deliver a learning experience, the way that we ensure student success, where we invest. We had others, of course, there's some nevers or to a small extent. So some institutions are telling us they're not having increasing pressures from leadership currently. But we're certainly seeing across industries that this is an area that's certainly increasing. Mike, as you went through the pandemic and you look at different organizations, I know that we had a good bit of inbound, a lot of requests for remote audits. We've had requests for added help to further deliver this financial picture, and I suspect you experienced the same.
Yeah, yes, Kevin, very much so. And I think that this notion, as a finance and accounting profession, I think there is an expectation that we're turning data into information in a very rapid way to support our business partners, whether they're commercial, whether they're higher education, from a leadership perspective. And this notion of data and financial data becoming more of an asset and treating it as such, I think is a thought or a strategy commercially that's really gaining momentum. And with the modern technology, right, it's really affording for that type of pace to be executed against. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. And really, I think ultimately this could become a competitive advantage for any institution or commercial enterprise that can get their arms around this data and create that speed to value.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So another quick live polling question here. Again, just to kind of assess the representation in the group today. What is the size of your institution's enrollment? So, looking at your total enrollment, if you could take a few seconds to respond, we'll give it about another 12 seconds here. And again, regardless of enrollment, there's different pressures in the finance area that we'll talk about. Let's go ahead and see the results, Stephen. Okay, bear with me, everyone. Okay, so a lot of institutions, 43% are under 3,000 students. Next tier, 3,000 to 10,000, 26% of those respondents. We had 6% in that 10,000 to 15,000 range, and then 17% over 15,000. And it's really, and that's fantastic. It's great representation. The finance challenges are similar, but more intense in different areas, often due to your enrollment. So for example, when we work with very small institutions and talk with some of the challenges they're facing, it is often a resource issue. We've limited staff. We're trying to close the books, and maintaining staff and staff morale is really a key driver there. And it's something that those types of institutions are often focusing on in our experience. As you go up the FTE scale, it does become a workload issue where there's smaller staff, but a lot more transactions, a lot more that we need to deal with in terms of looking at our cash accounts, substantiating our cash accounts, and truly being audit ready. Being in a position where we feel good about our financial picture, where it stands, and that we've really uncovered every stone and substantiated each of those balances. This all leads to capacity. So, when we look at what is important to the institution, we look at the strategic plan. And what drives the strategic plan? It's our leadership. It is the board, the president, the executive leadership committee, CIO, CFO, et cetera. And aligning to that and putting the systems in place to align to that is very important. And it comes down to, a couple things. First of all, managing risk. Okay, so putting systems in place that mitigate risk and set us up to scale, to bring on new staff, to deliver to our constituents, and reducing a lot of that manual or disconnected work, and that leads to optimizing business processes. What is optimization? Well, by definition, it's really a better way of doing things, and it's delivering in a way that in the most cost-effective and resource-effective manner based on the resources we have today, and that's what's going to allow us to execute efficiently. Aligning to the strategic plan creates capacity. So now you have capacity among your finance staff, your accounting staff, your leadership to deal with very important issues at the institution and really contribute to that strategic direction versus a lot of that manual work just getting through the day and maintaining staff. So top accounting and finance priorities. We asked, what are the top priorities for your institution's accounting and finance leadership? Kind of just dovetailing off that last slide, better supporting the institution's strategic objectives. It's really what guides us. And I'm consistently seeing finance agility and a better financial picture be a component of each of your strategic plans. And of course, accelerating and improving finance and accounting processes, process improvement, a very consistent theme, which leads to the ability to provide accurate data to make better decisions. Mike, as you look at some of these results, did anything stand out to you? And is this pretty consistent with what you were expecting?
Yeah, very consistent, Kevin. I think, to what you articulated, foundationally having timely, accurate, and complete data. That's a trusted source that can then be turned into information for management to make optimized decisions. And even if it's not, let's say, on the statutory side of things, just even from an internal management perspective on where do we think we're going to land, where do we want to pivot any investments depending on how the actuals are coming in, do we want to shift from one area of investment over to another? I think that's the type of decision making leaders are certainly looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. One result that surprised me, quite honestly, was reducing the support burden on IT. We're seeing an increased burden on IT in a lot of cases to help deliver this financial data. So, as we work to close our books, work to present that accurate financial picture, there's a lot of exporting and importing, both from IT and then, of course, getting data from our cash accounts. And it is very taxing at a lot of institutions. And worse, a lot of institutions currently are doing this in a very manual manner. So, we're working with our IT staff to export, and then we're importing into Excel, which, it's kind of crazy, but that's the way that it's always been done. And very manual, risk prone, and that is an area that's typically not sustainable as the institution grows. Shifting to analysis and higher value tasks, a lot of the process improvement, the successful ones that are put in place, really deliver on this specific point. All right, thanks, Mike. How effectively is your institution automated accounting and finance activities and workflows? This is new to a lot of institutions. It is not new to a lot of other industries, but we're seeing a migration and some institutions that are really embracing this well. Really taking the advantage of automation opportunities to, to my last point, use staff to deliver higher value activities. Only 14% reported very effective accounting and finance automation. So, I'm actually surprised it's that high, to be quite honest. I think that there's a big opportunity here. There's a big opportunity to automate some of the things that are kind of rote and manual. And we had about 30% of our respondents report, really not effectively, not at all, or somewhat effectively. So it's a bit of a subjective question because it's kind of, what is automation? What are we automating? But if you think about some of the manual processes that are currently in place, there's your opportunity. And it's certainly not automating anyone out of a job, but rather it's shifting their responsibilities. They arrive in the morning, they start working, but you move towards 70, 80% of those manual tasks being completed where you're able to focus on substantiation, supporting balances, either working with the business, working with the department heads and other areas of the institution where you need some additional information that previously we just did not have time to get to. Mike, if you want to share any comments on this and your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I think one of the things that come to mind from a commercial perspective is that we would see a similar opportunity, right? Now, when I was at Johnson & Johnson, we initially started with a robotics program where we were trying to, across our ERP landscape, which was significant, about 60 ERPs, putting in these little, what I call bot Band-Aids, but they were very difficult to, achieve any type of great result at scale because all of these ERPs were very, very different. I think where our strategy evolved at Johnson & Johnson was to use companies like BlackLine, right, which is a software as a service that was building that robotics and automation capability into the core application. And by moving our process into the BlackLine core, we were getting the immediate benefits of automation at scale. And we could deploy that across the enterprise. So I think still an opportunity in a commercial sphere. And I do believe that's why commercially many companies are moving toward SaaS vendors to be the, let's say, implementation means to help digitize their accounting functions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great background, Mike. I mean, the opportunity really takes place in different forms, just as automation does as well. We see a number of institutions moving more towards purpose-built applications, specific to the finance function. And here's what I mean by that. I've seen institutions adopt a little bit of RPA. Okay, so robotic process automation, and this is where you're configuring general bots to perform certain functions, and they can work pretty well actually on for certain functions. So some of your outlier programs or some of the grants management grants management needs, I should say, in really tailoring that specific to the institution. The challenge, of course, is you need to be prepared to modify and maintain the bot as your needs change, as your data structure changes, and certainly through an ERP change as well. So, and then we have other institutions that are not quite getting what they need out of their student information system specific to the finance area. And, historically, regardless of your SIS, it's not really focused on automation. There's some basic functionality, some check the box functionality. You can certainly, reconcile on your GL. You can perform some basic functions, but not really creating the opportunities for collaboration among staff, supporting document storage, auto certification of low risk accounts, RECs. There's just other opportunities for automation that can really help the institution better align resources toward the strategic plan. So we spoke about IT a little bit a little bit earlier in the presentation, and specific to that, we asked, how challenging is it for your institution's IT and accounting departments to communicate effectively? In terms of requirements, needs, support, and of course onboarding. And not too surprising, 67% reported some level of challenges communicating accounting and finance technology needs. We've seen the IT finance relationship overall very good across institutions. So it is not a measure of the quality of the collaboration, but rather articulation of needs and then receiving support for those needs. Here are some of the things that we've seen. The CFO-CIO relationship, often at some institutions and some of the progressive institutions, IT has a relationship with the vendor landscape, okay, and technology, and they look at what they're doing today with their staff, with the IT staff, and introduce solutions to finance that could be a fit or worth consideration, worth evaluation, and they know would lower the workload of the IT staff or lower risk for the institution, creating new opportunities there. There are many institutions also that know they have a challenge in how they're addressing closing the books and creating their financial picture, producing board reports, all the different functions that occur in accounting and finance, yet have trouble articulating how to solve those issues to IT. So, and of course, there's competing priorities. IT naturally has a backlog. You're trying to get your project on the list, which, hey, it could be, next fiscal, it could be a year out, it could be 9 months. I've seen a very wide gamut. And that's where a lot of the challenge lies. So articulating needs and partnering with IT, which is very important to address those needs. And it often is through a cloud solution to match the rest of the landscape or at least the intended landscape within IT. Mike, feel free to comment on any aspect of this. I was actually a little surprised that Somewhat Easy was as high as it was in terms of what I've seen in the industry and communicating finance needs.
Yeah, this is, I think, a consistent challenge commercially as well. I think oftentimes commercially, we understand what the problem statement is. We can see where the frustrations are. But I think to your point, Kevin, this is where the CFO and CIO need to partner. I think this is where you have to make sure you take a very cogent approach to your business case. You have to be able to understand kind of what your current situation is, and if you were to invest, what the future state could look like. And then most importantly, tether that to how then the function can support the business or the leadership in a differentiated way by repurposing, resourcing, by automating the repetitive to be able to provide more timely, frequent, consistent data for better decision making. But I think that's where, how that story is told that secures the funds to make the progression becomes very, very important.
So true. Yeah. Couldn't agree more, Mike. Let's go to another poll question. A little lengthier here. This is actually our last one. From your perspective, what are the most critical considerations when evaluating any cloud-based financial accounting solution? And if you think about, when you consider different vendor solution, regardless of what it is or what purpose, what is most important to you? So if you think about your function, what do you look for? We're going to give this about a few more seconds here. And that was a quick one. We'll take a look at the results in just a moment and see our front runners. So very interesting. 31% reported automation and acceleration of processes was most important. So that was the That was the lead response, followed by integration with existing systems. No surprise there. Integration is very important. So we've got a cohesive landscape. It just reduces the workload and support care and feeding of the whole ecosystem. And third was cost savings at 19%. Also not surprising at all. So, we've got a lot of scrutiny on costs where we're allocating financial resources right now. And this has got to be one of the key considerations, both initially as well as over the long haul. Great, thanks for all of the responses. One of the things that's really important when we talk about integration with existing systems, where that lives, and there's a number of solutions, including ours, that are designed to live alongside the student information system, and a number of institutions have adopted this. It really performs the functions outside of the SIS, functions it really wasn't designed to do, and the accounting staff really lives within this cloud platform. So here's what we're hearing: how CIOs and CFOs are approaching transformation. Transformation is a pretty broad term. We look at it in the sense of really improving processes and reinventing the way that we're doing things in the office, in the finance office, but also how that ties into our partnership with the CIO. We have a large number of migrations currently. Many of you are moving from one ERP to the next. From our point of view and our perspective, the question inevitably comes up, which do you do first? Do you implement automation? Do you look at some of our current processes, or wait till the ERP is live in 18 months or so? So, that chicken or the egg question. And the majority of institutions look at, really cleaning up their accounts, cleaning up their data, cleaning up open items, and addressing that issue concurrently, at the same time while they're moving forward with the ERP. Often the right solution can address those issues in a few months, often before in many cases, actually before the kickoff meeting with the new ERP vendor. And that gets you in a better position to move forward and migrate better data and have less disruption, because you have this financial close process, the systems in place that aren't impacted by that move from one GL to the next, versus having a hard cutover or a transitionary period. And we find that many institutions are held back by tactical business support, and this can create risks. So a lot of what we want to do when migrating to a new ERP, and we are not an ERP, by the way, but we deal with many institutions that are looking, considering, or actively moving to one. It really becomes risk mitigation and reducing disruption to the business, reducing disruption to the finance office, and our ability to produce financials for the institution. From the CFO standpoint, we find that many are looking to partner with IT leadership to accelerate what they'd like to accomplish, and put something better in place, whatever better may be. But by partnering with the CIO, you can effectively find solutions like this that will really change the day-to-day and put the institution in a much better position and create capacity. They often want automation, looking at the routine tasks that their staff's performing, looking for those opportunities, and that better supports a virtual workforce as well. Having cloud-based systems, whether it's your ERP, whether it's something like BlackLine, allows staff to really have a consistent experience, and it allows their institutions to really work smarter and more strategically without disruption. Mike, you've been through a number of these. Anything to add? And I know you're a little bit different scope. Our institutions, typically have one of 5 or 6 ERPs, depending on the type of institution. Of course, there's some that are very popular. Currently, you dealt with about 60, so it's on a grander scale. But I think you'd probably agree this partnership is very important with the CIO and CFO.
Yeah, no, totally, Kevin. I mean, that is critical. And I think that, something else that I would just further accentuate is at some point we felt that if we did not invest, we would be at a competitive disadvantage, right? Because other companies were progressing, they were modernizing their infrastructure, they were automating appropriately, and they were able to redeploy capital to the higher value added analytical types of activities that we were discussing. Secondarily, if we did not invest, we were going to lose the talent war, because generationally, I think, some of the newer entrants into the workforce do not, or have much higher expectation of how they want to interact with technology. They're aware of what technology can do, and they really want to focus on applying the skills that they graduated with versus manually reconciling data, manually, doing things in Excel or using Alteryx to splice data together. And, that was a very real concern for us and was a real impetus on a call to action on why we needed to invest.
Now is a great time to invest, while we work through this, getting back to norms, working through a recovery. And, personnel, talent, I think that's part of the key issue. So just kind of setting aside the benefits of automation and, getting rid of these risk prone manual tasks, it's become an expectation for incoming staff. I can't tell you how many institutions that I've spoken with in the past year that were working on their transformation strategy, planning for it, about to execute, and inevitably you get that call from the controller that just, it's just disheartening. I just lost 2 staff, 3 staff. We've got our June close coming up, or we're going through audit in July. We just can't do anything right now. That literally crippled with workload and really no backup plan. But trying to hire staff that isn't, it really has an expectation of a certain level of technology versus living out of spreadsheets from day to day, and then of course no onboarding plan because there really isn't a foundation in place. So, continuity, having the right staff, retaining talent is really the key to being able to execute on a digital transformation strategy, really process improvement within finance, which is going to allow us to align to the strategic plan. So, with that, I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and let me just jump over here. Once again, you're going to see some Q&A appear throughout, or you could submit your questions, and Mike and I are going to, get to these as they come in and as best we can. Okay, so what is the role of institutional research in upgrading accounting and finance reporting in making real-time access for leadership? That's a great question. And what I'm finding, institutional research is playing an increasing role, both in the requirements gathering and evaluation of automation type solutions. Institutional research has been key in informing the rest of the business. It's a different perspective that is outside of IT as well as finance, and allows the evaluation and the requirements gathering to be a more organized approach and a more thoughtful approach. I'm seeing that increasing over the past year. It did not start that way, but we certainly recommend different types of participation from areas of the business that would be impacted. When we look at finance reporting and making real-time access for leadership, institutional research often helps define, that definition of what that looks like. What are our KPIs? What's important to leadership, and how are we going to report on it? How are we going to really truly represent the dynamics of the institution right now, where we need to pivot, where we need to continue to invest. And I believe that's really key. So thank you for the question. It's a really good one. Okay, let's go to the next one here. From a change management perspective, what are some best practices in getting our departments on board with new finance, technology, and processes? Great question. This is the classic. Um, there can be some resistance to change, and I can tell you from our experience, a lot of finance processes have been in place for quite some time and really haven't evolved much. And Mike, I know you've managed staff, as am I, but I love your perspective on this. On how do you get other departments on board? How do you get key staff on board with making this change, helping them understand why to change and how to change?
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for the question. I think I would bifurcate it into two streams. I think within the finance and accounting function itself, I think there was specific change management communication that was very positive, where we were reacting to concerns within our associates of the state of our process and technology ecosystem. So by articulating that we're going to invest in the best technology that the world had to offer, it was very well received by our function. Now, that said, we did also have to deal with the messaging around the fact that, well, are we going to reduce headcount or are we going to redeploy headcount? So we were very transparent that since we were on the growth curve from a revenue perspective, that we were going to, let's say, change the focus of their work. And this wasn't really about a staff reduction. So I think within a finance sphere, which for J&J touched about 6,500 people, I think that messaging was very crisp and concise. Then from a change management perspective, we also had to ensure we had the right messaging with our business partners, right? Because we had to articulate to the business that we were going to now serve them in a differentiated way. And we got them very excited about the fact that we were going to have more timely, frequent, actual, complete actual data to provide better decision making. But we were also, I think, very prudent in the fact that, it might not happen overnight. And it was a bit of a journey because that change, we're trying to change the wheel on the bus as the bus is going down the highway. So we're trying to shift from a complex legacy architecture to a new architecture, and there might be some hiccups along the way. So I think, Kevin, those are some of the themes, just to be transparent, but to also, make sure that folks understand that while we're shooting for an end state that's going to be nirvana, that it's going to take a little bit of a journey to get to that point.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I often work with institutions to show where peer institutions have gone and where they, really what the outcomes are, and focusing on outcomes, how that staff works a bit differently, a lot smarter as well. And that's been very helpful. I'm going to go to the next question we just got in the Q&A. How do other institutions build a case to implement new accounting systems and automation? I think the key here is, first of all, articulating the benefits of automation and the problem that we're trying to solve. And that could be talent, limited staff, limited resources, delivering an accurate financial picture more accurately and sooner, and supporting, a lot of institutions. I've seen everything from an annual close to a quarterly close. More are really expected to deliver a timely monthly close, which has been a challenge, and many don't close monthly. But and there are some that do, but they're simply not, reconciling all their accounts. It's just the higher risk or higher volume accounts, which isn't, really the best way to go about this. So, articulating to leadership the added deliverables, but first of all, not necessarily that, hey, we're not doing what we should be doing, but rather, here's a better outcome. This will support the strategic plan. This will give us better financial agility, a better financial picture. It will enable us to deliver with current staff, more sooner in a timely fashion, and that's not an overcommitment. That really is the benefit of proper automation. So those are some of the things, again, articulating outcomes, and most importantly, how this aligns to the strategic plan. It's very important for most institutions to tie any of these investments and any initiative to two things: aligning to the strategic plan, and secondly, how this benefits and supports student success. And often those two are directly tied together. Thanks for the question. That was great. Okay, let's see. We've got one more question. We're about to move to a different student information system, which has some new finance capabilities. How does this platform work with our SIS? And how would we, and should we wait until we are fully live with the new system before looking at automating some of our accounting functions? Great question. And we touched on a little bit of this earlier in the presentation. Often you want to clean up your data before any kind of SIS migration. And many automation projects, even specific to our platform, just speaking, candidly about Blackline, this is typically about a 3-month implementation. It's a pretty light lift because, what you're looking at is packaged automation that is prescriptive. It's designed for best practices at the institution while being mapped specific to your chart of accounts and your student information system. We have many customers that are, moving to, Oracle Cloud, Workday, Banner Cloud, for example. And these are all important migrations that can be disruptive. And the end state is really not true automation. There are automation capabilities in each of these student information systems, but it's not specific to deep automation within the finance area, simply because they're not designed to. They're your core GL. They're your core single source of the truth. However, systems like Blackline handle your supporting documents, auto-reconcile. It has a lot more workflow and just different capabilities that support your institution outside, but integrated with the ERP. But it's very important to, again, have clean data before that migration. So the majority of institutions handle this first. And again, I mentioned before, it's kind of funny, often is completed before even your ERP kickoff meeting. And that is going to really clean up the finance data, have accounts fully reconciled, really have a better set of data before you move over to that to that new ERP. Many institutions also that even change their chart of accounts, as they're moving to a new SIS, and that's relatively common. But again, something you want to have addressed and cleaned up before you move over, so that you're not delaying that ERP migration. And most importantly, as it is taking place, if you go to schedule, which a lot of us know, we'll keep finance and accounting operating in an environment that is integrated with the old ERP and switches over when the new one is live, but they are still in that consistent environment designed specific for the accounting team. So hopefully that helps answer the question, but that's what we commonly see.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and both you, Kevin and Mike, for taking the time with us today. And while I go through my last 2 slides, I'd just like the audience to know that if you come up with any more questions during this time, please feel free to put them in the Q&A still. So after the event, our friends over at Blackline will get to your question after the event. So please feel free to continue submitting your questions during this time. And, to our audience, I would like to thank our attendees for joining us today. For those of you who really enjoyed our presentation, you'll be pleased to know there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by University Business, which, as you all know, we're the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, as well as current issues in higher ed. We have a wide range of readers at UB, and they subscribe for free and stay up to date with us through our print magazine, our newsletters, as well as our web seminars like this one. And also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or, those of you who believe that the solutions that our friends over at Blackline provided would be helpful to your colleagues, you'll be pleased to know that our team at UB, we will be sending you an email at some point tomorrow, and that will include the on-demand recording of this webinar, as well as a link to the slides. So with that, on behalf of UB, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. And again, thank you, Kevin and Mike.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for all who joined, and thanks, University Business. It was a pleasure.